Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum viewers. I'm your host S M Hali, presenting another edition of Defense and Diplomacy. 26th of November 2011 was a major day in the history of Pakistan because on this particular day, NATO helicopters attacked the Pakistan Army checkpost at Salala, in which 24 or 25 Pakistan Army personnel, including officers, embraced Shahadat. Pakistan reacted very strongly, and two actions took place. One, Pakistan stopped the NATO supply routes going through Pakistan. The second, it boycotted the Bonn conference, which followed on 5th of December. Nearly 6 months have passed. The NATO supply route has not been opened, causing serious difficulty to the NATO and ISAF forces in Afghanistan. But now the government of Pakistan has taken a decision in principle. Only the nitty-gritty is to be worked out for reopening this particular route. To discuss this very important matter, we have two eminent panelists in our studio today. In keeping with the title Defense and Diplomacy, we have Lieutenant General Talat Masood, who may be an army person, but is more suave and more polite than many diplomats. Welcome, sir. And we have a diplomat par excellence, Ambassador Aslam Rizvi, who has his origins in the defense forces. Welcome, sir. Sir, the decision has been taken in principle. Are there any caveats to this particular decision?
Well, there are caveats in the sense that they would like to work out as to exactly the modalities as to how this agreement will take place. What are the demands on the U.S. in terms, or the NATO forces, in terms of the toll tax that they probably are like to impose, because after all, I mean, roads are being used or ports are being used. So there is a lot of wear and tear that takes place, and which is a normal international custom. So I think based on that, they are trying to work out those modalities. And at the same time, I think they are also trying to see as to ensure that, you know, they do not carry weapons, and it is only confined to you know, food and lubricants and fuel and so on.
Right. Ambassador Aslam Rizvi, looking at it from the diplomatic point of view, there were two conditions which Pakistan had imposed for reopening this route. The first one was the US government renders a formal apology for the death or the shahadat of our soldiers. The second was to stop the drone attacks. Apparently, these two aspects are now way behind us. How do you look at it, sir?
Well, it has been agreed in principle to reopen the NATO supplies route, as pointed out by General Talat. We are working on the technical aspects of it. The memorandum of understanding is about to take place. There is a likelihood that the cost of transportation will increase from $365 or $350 per container to almost $1,500 to $1,800. So roughly about $1 million a day. That is one. As for the other two, the drones and the apology, these are still to be sorted. They are very much on the table, and they are being sorted out by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What shape and form they will eventually take is to be seen yet.
Right. General Talat Masood, you wrote a very interesting article in one of Pakistan's leading dailies on the same topic, in which you mentioned about these. So can you share with our viewers your opinion about the apology first?
Well, I think we have to understand that at one time the Americans were somewhat willing to apologize, but this was quite a few months back, and Pakistan probably thought it would be more appropriate if they did that after the recommendations of the parliament. But as you know, in America, if you do not take the opportunity, you always miss it. And this is exactly what happened, because today America is in a different political cycle. The presidential elections are getting closer, and it would be very difficult for President Obama, or for that matter for the administration, to extend an apology at this time, because the Republicans then will use it and say that a superpower is so weak and it continues to apologize. So I think...
but I believe, sir, as a face-saving gesture, the Pentagon is willing to render an apology at the military level.
Well, it's quite possible. That's why they're trying to work out so that, there is some sort of a midway. They can work out something. And as far as the other aspect is concerned, that is the drones. I think we have to understand that that is the centerpiece of their counter-terrorism policy. And till such time that we have, unfortunately, the sanctuaries because of Afghanistan's present conflict in the tribal area and the border being so porous as it is, it becomes very difficult to stop these drones, although we would have very much liked, because after all it does violate our sovereignty all the time, and it's also a source of political embarrassment and diplomatic embarrassment for Pakistan, being an ally of the US. But I think we also have to see that we must exercise and establish our writ in the tribal belt.
Right, but as far as the drone attacks are concerned, so there is now considerable difference of opinion even in the US. Bill Quigley, in his article the day before in the US media, writes, in fact, he cites 5 reasons why these drone attacks are illegal. And the first one he cites are, of course, that since 1976, the US government had stopped the CIA from targeting heads of states or carrying out political killings. If you recall, at that time, there was a plan to take out Fidel Castro, Patrice Lumumba, and a few other characters. So, and so on. How do you look at it, sir? The opinion contrary to the drone attacks in the US?
Well, may I just add to what was said regarding the apology? The important thing, of course, here is that something happened in Salalah, and it is important to see now how we can ensure that such incident do not reoccur, and that's what they're working on right now at the moment. And an apology was, a regret was forthcoming then, and perhaps now an apology will also be coming in some form or the other. Now, as far as the drones are concerned, although there have been also statements coming from the United States to say that it is justified, legally it is permissible, but it is clearly a violation of United Nations International Charter for the use of it. Now, we must also mention the fact that because of our extreme that we had in Pakistan, where we have not only allowed the drones to operate from here, we also had provided facilities, base in Pakistan, which has now been closed. So we have to look at the drones on 2 aspects of it. The legality of it, on one hand. On the second hand, the effectiveness of it against the militants that are operating from here. The fact is that even Obama and I beg your pardon, Osama bin Laden, in his documents that have been found in Abbottabad, has mentioned the fact that it has been one of the most devastating weapons against Al-Qaeda, and has caused a lot of damage. Now, these, as the General Saab mentioned, that is the most effective way for them to deal with militants, not only here, but in other parts of the world. But what are we to do if we want to stop it? We can, of course, shoot them down, but do we want to open an air battle with the United States and have them also attack our land targets? One. Secondly, if you notice that in Afghanistan, President Karzai has been very successful in getting the Americans to agree to let the night raids be Afghan-led. Now, he tried his best to stop them, but he did not. Now, if we accept that the utility and the importance of the drones against the militants, and we can coordinate with the Americans the target selection of targets, the timing, and so forth, perhaps it would be in our mutual interest to
perhaps reduce the collateral damage, which is actually causing more bad blood. There has been an offshoot, although it's being said that the two are not interrelated, but Pakistan has received a formal invitation to attend the Chicago conference, which will be held at Chicago on the 20th and 21st of this month. We had boycotted, as I mentioned earlier, the Bonn conference. That's way past us now. But how do you see the importance of this, and are these two interrelated, sir?
Well, I think they are somewhat obliquely interrelated, but at the same time, I think Chicago is very important. It is, of course, essentially a NATO conference for the NATO countries, but at the same time, Pakistan, because of Afghanistan and the interest of NATO in this region, becomes a very important player. And that US and NATO countries are withdrawing from NATO by 2014, and they are planning the exit. It's very important that Pakistan puts its input to guard its interests. And to not attend, it would have been would have meant that we would have been isolated, which we cannot afford, because at that point of time, not attending the Bonn conference was totally justified in view of the incident that had taken place. But you don't want to continue with that posture forever, because you have to develop relations with the rest of the world. You have to maintain in your own national interest. So I think it's a very wise decision that, and of course the invitation has also come, and I hope that President Zardari will go there, will be able to put across Pakistan's viewpoint, in which and then I think we also have to emphasize there the extent of sacrifices that Pakistan is making. Although there seems to be a great sympathy and focus on Afghanistan, unfortunately, this is not the case as far as Pakistan is concerned. So President Zardari's presence and his projection of Pakistan's viewpoint should help in the world understanding the way Pakistan is suffering as a result of the Afghanistan situation.
Right. But at the same time, sir, you see Pakistan, as the General also mentioned, that Pakistan cannot afford to be isolated. And it's not just a question of the NATO supply routes or things like an apology. There are so many projects which Pakistan is planning, the Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline, the TAPI, and so on. All these get into a jeopardy if we remain isolated. So what's your opinion, sir?
Yes, I totally agree. The point is that the NATO summit participation is important, although as mentioned correctly, it is a NATO summit, and they are not only Afghanistan is one of the one of the points that are going to be discussed there. The second, of course, is smart defense, and third is the enlargement of NATO itself. But the most significant and important one, of course, is the end game in Afghanistan. As you know, you have to appreciate that for a stable and a political outcome in Afghanistan, the key players, that is United States, President Karzai and his allies, the Taliban, and Pakistan have to coordinate the policies. And if Pakistan is out of the loop, then our position will go there by default. We will be suffering that. So it is very important, it was critical that Pakistan should be there to project our point of view. And we are the ones who are promoting dialogue. And we have been supporting the supply routes for the last 10 years. Now at this point, when they are an end is about to come there, we are thinking of, instead of facilitating, and we are seen to be somebody who was bringing hindrance to the final outcome, was not in the light. So it was very important that Pakistan should be seen as somebody who is contributing to the final settlement of Afghanistan.
Right. So it is important, as the ambassador just mentioned, that we have come out of the box, and unfortunately we had nearly got boxed into this particular situation. But if you notice that the end game, which he also mentioned, is likely to be till 2014, because beyond that, if the Americans have a strategic pact with Mr. Karzai, that's only for the special forces and for the trainers, which will continue till 2024. So Pakistan does have a very important role to play, which is being recognized to a certain extent. So how do you think this will help with our position, with our presence in Chicago, as well as in further negotiations with the US?
Well, I think it's very important, because the most important and crucial neighbor of Afghanistan is Pakistan. And as you are aware, the Americans and the NATO countries fully realize that. And in fact, they have been very unfairly blaming Pakistan for many things. So it also affords an opportunity for Pakistan to put across its viewpoint and say that instead of trying to criticize us, try to look at the amount of suffering that we have undergone because of Afghanistan's situation and the way that the policies of US and NATO have created for Pakistan. Then furthermore, I think we have to understand that Afghanistan is a landlocked country. There is no way that we can stop, the passage of goods to Afghanistan in any case. So that would be a defiance of international law, actually. So we must also look at the problem from this aspect, that we being that country which has a port and gives access to Afghanistan, cannot deny it that access. It's right. So that is also one of the points which sometimes people overlook.
Exactly, well put, sir, because it is, they say that you can choose your friends, but you cannot choose your neighbors, yeah. Pakistan and Afghanistan.
And it's not an end game for Pakistan. You see, we also have to not get into this narrative of end game, whereas end game is important for them, but for us, Afghanistan would always be there. And Afghanistan's prosperity and its stability is so critical and important for us. And we would like to contribute as much as possible that Afghanistan stabilizes for the sake of Afghanistan, but also equally or even more for our own in our own interest.
Right. Another development which has come about, maybe it's because of these peaceful overtures which Pakistan has made. The NDAA had put restrictions, the US government, on the aid that was to come to Pakistan, even other payments. But the President yesterday made it very clear that he would not like such restrictions to be placed. How do you see that, sir?
Well, I see that as a part of the pressure on Pakistan. And again, this is a kind of a Pressler amendment to an extent.
But President Obama seems to have relieved that pressure, sir.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that the fact that it has been introduced was a means of pressure. He himself had talked about the reconstruction zones not being, they're not willing to do that, special other restrictions and so forth. This was really, a pressure when this is the time when they are needing Pakistan to cooperate more to see how things will develop. Now, coming back on the Afghanistan, the so-called endgame, and recently the strategic partnership agreement between United States and Afghanistan, which the President Obama made on the eve of the
first anniversary of Osama bin Laden's assassination.
The key question there is, as the Afghans themselves are asking, is it that their presence and the bases that they're thinking are meant for Afghans themselves, or is it for a broader regional perspective, i.e. using it as a launch pad against Iran, or perhaps even jihadist outfits in Pakistan. So the General Saab is right, it's not an end game. It is likely to continue for another 10 years. And in Chicago, as General Allen mentioned also, that all the other NATO members were involved. They are also looking for a agreement of their own with Afghanistan for providing political, economic, and monitoring support for the ISAF forces, for the Afghan forces there, the financial help that they're going to provide. So it is good that the President Obama has, and the White House has, set this aside, improving the climate, and it is very important that as we are getting closer and closer toward their withdrawal, as you see that France is agreeing to withdraw earlier, so is Australia, and so forth.
In fact, if you recall, sir, Francois Hollande, the new president, this was one of his slogans in the election campaign, that he is going to immediately withdraw the French troops over there, which something NATO will probably try and convince him not to do that in a hurry.
Quite right. And also even Cameroon is talking about reducing the forces. Australia is also trying to pull out. And Panetta himself talking about, leaving there before 2013, towards the end. So all these the factors are there, bring in to focus the critical importance of having a political dialogue to be able to see how the situation will develop after the active combat role of NATO forces is ended there.
Right. General Talat Masood, you've also served as the Secretary of Defense Production, and you have a very keen sense of logistics. Coming back to the topic of the NATO supply routes, the alternate route which was being used, the northern route so-called, is 6,000 miles long, while the route from Pakistan is just 500 miles. And there is an allegation that Pakistan is haggling over the rates. You even mentioned some of the rates. But the fact is that this is going to be costing only a fraction of what they spend over there.
That's very true. I mean, and they are fully aware of that. And what would have probably happened is that they would have tried to partially offset that as well by reducing our assistance, although that would still would have left a lot of gap, and they would have had to pay a lot additional. Apart from the fact that it is they had to pay a lot more, the fact is it has to go through so many countries, and then the security of those countries is also unfortunately very poor, so it takes much longer, it's much more expensive, and it's more problematic. So I think resumption of Pakistan's logistic supply line, or what they call the ground
lines of communication,
I think that will be very helpful to the US and NATO forces and to the Afghans themselves. So and also apart from that, I think if you are an ally, then you have to conduct yourself as an ally. No doubt that there were circumstances which made us do what we did and took certain positions. But obviously we cannot continue with this state of affairs, because then otherwise what's going to happen, or what was happening, was on one hand the US was behaving as an ally, on the other hand it was behaving like an adversary. And you cannot have a combination of that, which means that the US would also be containing us, which would have, as has already been said by the ambassador, such repercussions as an economic squeeze and so on, which Pakistan hardly can afford at this point of time.
Right. So what, sir, would be your closing comments for the way forward?
Well, first let me just simply add quickly that we must differentiate between the reopening of the NATO supplies and the two conditions of apology and of the drones from here. These are, directly related to the United States. The NATO supplies routing is, of course, many other countries are involved as well. So it was important that we should not link the two. We need to move forward. That is the thing. We need to engage positively with all the countries in a political dialogue to see how we can play a positive role, and think in terms of not only just the 2014, but beyond. What will be the situation there? What role Pakistan play? And our objective would be that we are not thinking in terms of a strategic depth, but a country which is peaceful, a country which is neutral as far as Pakistan is concerned, because we are being next door neighbors.
Right. Your closing comments, sir.
Well, I think there's a lot at stake for us in the region and for our own stability and security. So I think cooperation with the US and NATO forces will always be very helpful, because it would also mean having close relations and good relations with the government in power in Afghanistan.
Right. So viewers, with that we come to the end of this discussion, and we find that both our eminent panelists are of the opinion that it may be the end game in Afghanistan for United States, its allies, ISAF and NATO. But for Pakistan, it's going to be a fresh beginning. Because as I mentioned earlier, you can choose your friends, but not your neighbors. Afghanistan is not only our neighbor, a very important neighbor, and Pakistan is a stakeholder in peace and prosperity over there. So Pakistan has not only to devise such policies which make sure that Pakistan has a say in the matters, but that Pakistan's own security, Pakistan's own strategic situation is improved by the actions taken in Afghanistan. I would like to thank you, Lieutenant General Talat Masood and Ambassador Aslam Rizvi, for your very kind comments. Viewers, keep sending us your comments and hope to see you next week, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.